We're not, Architects of Social Housing, we're not actually involved directly in the campaign against this massive redevelopment in the Haygate estate. That kind of began quite a while ago. And one of the things that was kind of the basis of the founding of Architects of Social Housing is when we got involved in 2015 with, I guess, what was then called housing movement. A lot of the resistance at the time was very much kind of at the end of the process. People occupying estates, people forming resistance at the point of bailiffs coming in. And we began to think, how can we get into this process much further down the line, much earlier in the process? And what we came up with was this idea of proposing alternatives to demolition of council and housing association estates. So coming up with architectural alternatives to demolition. So we wanted to get in much earlier in the process and start providing alternatives to the plans by councils and housing associations to demolish and redevelop these estates, as they have done on the Haygate, and as they are in the process of doing on the Ellsbury. So we haven't directly been involved in these campaigns, but the sort of stuff that we have been involved in and that I'll show you briefly are very relevant to that. I'm going to kind of divide this talk into sort of three parts. The first part, I'm going to talk fairly quickly about these alternatives to demolition that we worked on, these estates that we worked on. I kind of interpreted, but then I'm also going to, in the second part, I'm going to talk about what Joel said about how our kind of community support and engagement, which is very crucial, I think, in terms of getting involved in these campaigns, is how you get involved in that community, how you don't simply become an outsider, but how you get involved with that community, how you get them to trust you and how you can work with them and find out what they want from you and what you can give to them, which is a very important thing, I think. And then the third part of the talk, which I'll hopefully be able to focus on a bit more, is to look at some of the work that Ash has done in, I guess, things like protests and propaganda, as we call it, or counter-propaganda, perhaps is a good word. And I guess, in my kind of understanding, I thought that might be more relevant to you as art students or artists. Not that I think it's a question of merely translating what we do into kind of artwork or something, but hopefully by going through some of the examples of what we've done, I can try and extract maybe some kind of principles or do's and don'ts or lessons learned, if you like, of what we've done, which might help you if you're thinking of getting involved in these campaigns as an artist. So the first part is resistance by design. This is this phrase we use to talk about this architectural work that we do, a form of resistance through design. The first estate we got involved in was actually our estate. We live in the big tall tower blocks on the right-hand side there. But there's a lower component of the estate, which was designed for elderly people or people living with disabilities. And the council, Lambeth Council, came in and kind of isolated it from the rest of the estate and said, this is too low rise, it's not dense enough. Therefore, we're going to demolish your homes and build much higher density housing there. When we were contacted by the residents, they were facing three options from the council, which were all for full demolition of the entire estate. So we came up with this idea, or rather Geraldine came up with this idea, that we could increase the housing capacity of the estate and therefore address the council's need, or declared need, for more housing for homeless people or people on the housing waiting list. This is one of the key kind of arguments that councils make for estate demolition. We need more housing. But also generate the funds to refurbish the existing homes, which, as in all these estates, have often been neglected for years, sometimes decades, by the council. Generally is a process that we call managed decline, where you let these buildings fall into disrepair, you neglect them, and then you say, well, we don't have the funds to refurbish and maintain them, therefore we're going to demolish them. So we had to kind of address, through design, two of these reasons for demolishing the estate: to raise the funds to refurbish them and to increase their housing capacity. And in this case, we did it through a combination of infill, that is building on land which has been identified by the residents as land that they're willing to give up, which you could then build on. So the tower to the left, so I'm going to point to the tower to the left, and the towers on the top right there, but also through roof extensions. These buildings are reinforced concrete, they're very, very strong, and despite what everyone tells us, they're nowhere near like the end of their shelf life. They've got a very long shelf life, they're very well built. And you can build wooden roof extensions, wooden frame roof extensions on top of them. By doing this, we were able to increase the housing capacity enormously. I can't quite remember the figures now, what was it?
I heard about 200%.
Yeah, 200% or something like that. And by selling a proportion of these homes, a proportion of them, on London's ridiculously inflated sales market, private sales market, you can generate a huge amount of funds to then build more council homes or social homes and refurbish the existing ones. So in a way we were kind of using this ridiculously inflated market that we've got here and taking that money to maintain the estate. Now, we came in kind of quite late in this process. It didn't save the whole estate, it saved half of it. By getting involved in this campaign, and by forcing the council to consider these proposals, it made them go back to the drawing board, re-employ the architects who they were employing, May Architects, a big architectural firm, to come up with different options, and eventually they came up with a partial demolition option, in which the left-hand side of the estate which is not the large homes, but kind of the flats. They can be demolished, but the rest of the estate is being saved. So we thought, wow, this is great. We just managed to save half these homes. We kind of thought we were really onto something there. The next estate we got involved in is Central Hill Estate, which is up in Crystal Palace in South London. It runs along a tree-lined bridge, it's got extraordinary views of London to the north and has democratic access of every building on it, where it's arranged across this hill to sunlight from the south. You always find that these estates are on very sought-after locations by property developers. And once they've been identified by the developers, then the council comes in and they employ people like architects, consultants and so on to come in and generate the excuses for demolishing them. Here again, I'm only going to go this briefly, but on this estate, through roof extensions, which are indicated in pink, and through infill development in yellow, we were able to potentially increase the housing capacity on this estate by 50% and easily generate the funds to do this, to refurbish the rest of the estate and to build it. This is a process which has still been going on. We've become involved with this estate for about 3 years. I'll talk a little bit later about what's happened to it. There's a very similar sort of process going on with West Kensington and Gibbs Green estates. These are two estates which are both being identified for demolition. Here, this was a development scheme in which a property developer called Capco had basically been sold the land by the council, Hammersmith and Fulham Council. And this was part of a large regeneration of the area, regeneration in inverted commas, which included the Earls Court site. Originally, we were told that the developers were looking at the Earls Court site, which has been demolished and is going to be redeveloped. And they sort of said, what's all this over here? And they said, oh, there's two council estates over there. They sort of extended the red line around it and included it in. There's been a very long campaign by the residents here, which has gone for 7-8 years by now. They managed to raise a fair amount of funds from charities, and they were able to employ us to work on this. In the previous estate, we didn't get any payment at all, but on this one, and this gives us the money to actually employ younger architects and come in and do the sort of the dog's work of the enormous amount of work of coming up with these alternative plans. In both these cases, we were able to develop these alternatives up to feasibility study. So we kind of produced a 50-page report. Now, this has also had sort of a partial success. It's still up in the air. Since Brexit, the market in luxury housing in London has plateaued off. It hasn't fallen so much, but it's definitely reached a plateau. And Capco's, the property developers, their share prices have plummeted. Not plummeted, they've certainly dropped considerably. And they're pulling out of the scheme. The local MP, Labour MP Andy Slaughter, talked about this in Parliament, in the House of Commons, and mentioned our designs and very nicely said that this is what the professionals should be doing. I think he realised that we're professionals as well, but we kind of get the point. He was kind of saying all the architects who are brought in to kind of demolish these estates they should be looking at these alternatives, which increase the housing capacity and don't demolish the estate, and therefore, crucially, keep that community together. Because what the examples of the Haygate have shown us is that when these estates are demolished, they're redeveloped with greater housing capacity, but almost no social housing at all. And the communities get moved off, and they don't come back. So it's absolutely crucial to us that we keep the community together. The only way we can do that is by keeping their homes in existence. This is another estate. This was actually, this is up in Hackney, Northwall Estate. This is a Guinness partnership, so a housing association estate. I think about 10 years previously, the council, Hackney Council, had proposed to the residents that the stock, the housing stock, be transferred into a housing association. The reason they said was because they didn't have the funds to maintain it. So they said to the residents, do you want to become a housing association? The residents, unsurprisingly, said, yeah, great, finally we can get our homes looked after. There are more people now living in housing association homes in the UK than there are in council homes, because so many council estates have been stock transferred to housing associations. Housing associations are one of the great implementers in the estate demolition programme. They're unaccountable, they're not subject to public scrutiny, they're forming bigger and bigger mergers, they are social providers of government providers of social housing. Registered providers of social housing, which means they get enormous numbers of tax breaks from the government, and they are making an absolute fortune out of this. Now, they decided, Guinness Partnership, that having been given this estate, they also couldn't look after it. And they said, well, we've got this obligation, which they don't because they're a private company, to build more housing to get people off the housing waiting list in the borough of Hackney. So they came up with a proposal that they would demolish half the estate and increase the housing capacity on the demolished part by redevelopment by X amount. We were brought in by the residents, and very quickly we came up with, again, through infill and roof extensions, that we could actually absolutely match the increase in housing capacity that they could achieve through demolition and redevelopment without demolishing a single home. One of the things about Guinness is because they are a private company, they're a bit more susceptible to publicity than councils are. Councils really just don't give a damn. The housing associations do, they've got a reputation to look after, and we kind of helped with the campaigning against this. And at the moment, it looks like they've pulled out of it, I think. They've actually pulled out of it, and the residents have kind of got it back. And by being able to, instead of just saying, no, we don't want you to do this, if you can say, no, you've got a better idea, it gives you a lot more leverage when you're kind of making these arguments against people. And basically, Guinness wasn't able to come back and say, oh, well, okay, why are we demolishing it? This is the Patmore estate, which is down in Wandsworth. It sits within something called an opportunity area. This is something where the Mayor of London is their planning authority for it. And it's often used when development areas cross different boroughs, in this case Wandsworth and Lambeth. It runs from Vauxhall all the way down to Battersea. It's the biggest building site in Europe. And at one end it's got, one end you've got St George's Tower, all those hideous buildings running along the Thames, and at the other end you've got the, just over here, yeah. And then at the other end you've got the Battersea Power Station development. It's kind of a bit of a match between these two, which is the most hideous architecturally. And they're both appalling in terms of their, the kind of the development they're building there. Unfortunately, right in the middle of all this, you've got a number of estates, council estates. This is Patmore. It's actually run by a cooperative. It's been a cooperative since, I think, the 50s or 60s, actually. Quite well. The 80s.
Yeah, 70s or 80s, I think so.
Working with cooperatives is a lot more easy because they've already got a kind of management structure. They know how to speak to the people, the residents on the estates. In council estates, they've been kind of neglected for so long in terms of maintenance, in terms of management, that when you go in, there isn't a really existing community there. You have to kind of find that community and kind of build it, if you like. In this case, you've got a much better management structure. Now, they haven't actually been told they're up for demolition yet, but they've been getting a series of kind of consultation papers where people come in and say, you like your estate, you think it's good, we'd like a kitchen, all these kind of questions. And we know that this kind of seals. Unfortunately, for them, for the council, the residents keep right back, and about 98% of them saying, yeah, we think our estate's great. So, but we know that it's definitely kind of under threat. So they brought us in, the co-op brought us in and said, we'd like a vision of the future of our estate. So maybe Jerry can talk about it later on, because I don't want to stop these too long. This isn't just about saving the estate from demolition by proposing more development. This is about kind of revaluing the estate. One of the things that we've identified with residents, or residents identified for us, is they have a lot of disused rooms, aspects of the estate, like laundry rooms, which nobody uses anymore. Built into the estate, it was built in the 50s and early 60s. And we thought, well, what can we do with these? And we kind of consulted residents, and they've come up with all sorts of ideas of what they could use these rooms for. And it's really about saying, if this exists within an opportunity area, this estate, which is on one end developing things like the Battersea Power Station, these enormously extensive multi-million pound properties, what opportunity goes to the residents of these council estates? So we're going to kind of start sort of arguing that if this is an opportunity area, you've got to start putting money into these estates and helping the people who already live here. So it's about trying to think about different measures of value and purely financial ones in terms of what money, how much money profit you can make out of redeveloping a land. What is the value that already exists in these communities, and how can we add to them? The last thing that we've just done recently is we had a launch of a report, which we've been working on for about a year, of the work that we did for Central Hill Estate, which I showed you earlier on. This is the one up in Crystal Palace. When we put forward our proposals to Lambeth Council, they rejected them like that. They came back and they employed quite a lot of people, engineers, quantity surveyors, consultancies and so on, to produce a series of reports on our proposal, saying that it was financially unviable. When we wanted to see these reports, because we were like, it doesn't sound like viable to us, they sent us back pages and pages of these reports, all of which were redacted. They all had just kind of black text across it. They looked like Malevich paintings. And we were like, well, how can this not be in the public interest? And we've spent quite a few years, actually, about a year and a half, sending freedom of information requests to the council, to the GLA, to the Information and Commission's office. We keep on getting it back. The redevelopment of the estate, the proposed redevelopment of the estate, by a private company set up by Lambeth Council, is going to be a commercial vehicle. Therefore, not only their figures, but our figures as well, are commercially confidential. So even though what they're proposing is the demolition of public assets, the council stock, and the privatisation of public land that it sits on, none of it is available for scrutiny by the public. So we thought, it's kind of through 2 years of work by Ash, went down the toilet, and we thought, Christ, what are we going to do with this? At first we were very kind of set back by this, but then we thought, actually this is a very important thing, because this means that if every estate in the UK happens to be lucky enough to have someone like Ash and the people who work with us to come up with these alternatives, all the council has to do is go, no, we just dismiss it, and we're not going to tell you why we dismiss it. You're not even allowed to scrutinise why we're rejecting your alternative. So we thought what we'll do is make our setback into a positive. We've written this big long report, which is not only containing our alternative to demolition, it also contains in-depth analysis of how it was rejected by Lambeth and why legislation needs to change if alternatives to estate demolition can become public policy and therefore enforceable on councils. So that if any council or housing association says to a bunch of residents, we're looking at options for regenerating your estate, the very first thing they have to do is look at the kind of alternatives that we're providing to keep those communities together. This is all on our website if you're interested in reading it. Okay, part 2, community support. Sure. When architects are brought into estate regeneration schemes, last year we did we tried to map London's estate regeneration scheme. The estate regeneration programme is an international one, it's a UK-wide one, but it's particularly focused on London because of the land values here, and therefore demolishing estates and redeveloping them. The residual land value in these estates, when it's developed with extremely high value or high cost housing, the land value goes up enormously. So it's very much focused. We identified last August 237 estates in London, which have recently are currently going through or are threatened with regeneration, with demolition or privatisation, which will lead to a loss of social housing. So this is going to affect hundreds of thousands of homes. When architects are brought into this, the consultation process begins many years before the residents are even told that their estate is being looked up for regeneration. They get in builders, they get in money men, investors, and they get in architectural companies. And they say to the architects, we've decided that we want to demolish and redevelop this estate. You need to go into the residents and find the reasons for doing so. So the architects are given a brief. They are not obliged, but encouraged to come up with a series of options, which will go for things like what we do, infill and roof extensions or infill options, partial demolition, and then the big ones, full demolition, which is what every estate wants. Every council wants. They want to demolish estates and redevelop them. It's the way to get the biggest value up. Now, because of that, when architects go into and start working with residents, they've already told what they're going to do. We know this. One young architect who worked with us said that I think he'd only graduated the year before, and he was given the task of finding the possible infill housing, increase in housing capacity on an estate, council estate. He was given one afternoon to do it. It takes us kind of months and months of work to do it. And unsurprisingly, the infill options by these architects employed by the councils are tiny. They come up with tiny amounts of homes. I think Northwold Estate, when we came up with like 250 homes or something, they came up with something like 30 or something like that. So we realised we had to do this a different way. And of course, when we come into these estates, when we're invited on, the first thing people think of us is like, Christ, you're architects. You're the baddies. You're the guys who are trying to demolish our estates. So what we realised, instead of coming from the outside, we kind of developed this model. This is kind of a mapping by one of our members of the way you go into the community first and you talk to them about what their needs are and their desires, what they need to happen to the existing estate, what they'd like for it to happen in the future. And it's only from there that you can expand out with kind of objectives and develop the means to achieve them. One of the ways we thought we could do this, because as I said before, when you go onto these estates, there isn't this kind of beautiful, really existing community there. A lot of the time there's a lot of factions within the group, there's a lot of disillusionment. One of the good things is, the best way to get these communities to form is to tell them they're going to demolish their homes. If you oppress the community, it fights back. So the actual process of resisting the demolition of their homes by councils and housing associations actually kind of compels that community to form. One of the ways we wanted to, if you like, help these communities to form, but also to put them in contact with us and other people, and with each other, is through this, what do you call it, an event, which we've been running for the last 3 years. And we call it Open Garden Estates. It happens on the same weekend, and it's kind of modelled on the Open House...
Open Garden Squares.
Open Garden Squares, yeah. Which is something run by...
What
is it?
National Trust.
National Trust or something like that, where they go around and they open out all the big kind of manor houses, you know, in London and all over the place, and people go around and kind of have a look around. Or maybe a place like this, they might come around and have a look at it. And we thought, well, rather than people just going around looking at all these beautiful houses that used to belong to aristocrats, why don't they have a look at these estates? Why don't they come and have a look at these estates? Because estates have got such negative propaganda about them. And if you've ever lived on an estate, or if you've gone to an estate, we've visited many, many of them, they are not anything like how they're depicted in the press and on TV and in the entertainment industry, the kind of poverty porn that we see on TV and in the press. They're actually very green, they're very beautiful, they're very, very well designed, most of them, and the communities in them are very tight. They're not full of, you know, you kind of negative stereotypes about it. So, we started this thing called Open Garden Estates, and the first year, this is a banner that we made, that we managed to get some money to make these banners, and we handed them out to every one of these estates who wanted to become part of Open Garden Estates. And one of the things we did is we designed maps of the estates, and we didn't actually run it. Each event is hosted by the community, the estate community, and what they do with it is up to them. Some people simply have a guided tour. They'll get people to walk onto these estates. We're always told about these estates, don't go walk through a estate at night. It's dangerous, you get knifed, drug users, blah, blah, blah. These people, so it's getting people onto the estate. In Central Hill, a lot of the people who came onto the walks, and the guided walks around, said it's the first time they've been on the estate. The other thing is, people who lived at one end of the estate had said they've never been at the other end of the estate as well. This is the really terrible thing. A lot of the negative propaganda about estate communities and council estates is believed by the people who live in them as well. So it's about this kind of revaluation of these estates and the communities that live there. So in this case, in Central Hill, they had a guided tour of the estate. You can see it's extremely green. There's lots of beautiful. This is a lovely kind of central green patch here. They've got lovely gardens. People were inviting people into their homes as well. Because everyone's house proud and wants to show their lovely garden and stuff like that. Some people kept it at that. Other people did other things. In this case, in the first year, they had
The second year they had the orchestra. It's up there.
Yeah, first year, this is them on the first year. A friend of ours who runs a Marxist puppet show came in and kind of held this puppet show here, which was great because he got all the kids and the families down. And he explained, it was kind of a way of kind of breaking down why they want to demolish your homes, how they want to increase value and all this stuff. And it's kind of good. I've never seen it before, but afterwards you know these families of these estates sitting around and kind of talking about how Marx can help them to understand why their estates want to be moved on and why the housing crisis exists. It was brilliant. As you can see, it's a really good fun day. Lots of people got to meet each other, but they also had a connection with all these other estates. On the first year we had 3. On the second year I think we had about 50. We've had about 18 estates in all hold this thing called Open Garden Estates. It also gave us an opportunity to show the designs to residents, but also people from around the area. State demolition, they kind of draw a red line around the estate. They want to kind of just erase it. But it affects everyone in that area as well. It affects your house prices, your rental prices. It affects, you're going to be living next to, even if you're not on the estate, you're going to be next to a building site for 15 to 20 years. It's going to put added pressure on social services, the roads, the schools, the clinics, everything. So even that red line that they draw around estates when they want to kind of just pick it up, chuck it away, everyone around there is going to be affected by it. So it's about getting other people onto the estate from the area and seeing these alternatives. The first thing that councils and housing associations do when they want to regenerate an estate is they shut down the community hall. They privatise it or they ban the residents from using it, one way or other, or they set prohibitive fees to using it. We had this in Central Hill, they've got enormous, great big rooms. We could never use them, the residents could never use them. First thing it does is it stops large groups of people getting together, talking to each other and organising. This gave us a chance by setting up this gazebo, to exhibit our designs with the kind of architectural alternatives, so people could see them. One of the best successes, I guess, we had through Open Garden Estates was Macintosh Court. This is a sheltered housing estate for elderly people, mostly single, up in, where is it? It's in Lambeth, it's Streatham, isn't it? Yeah. It's a beautiful estate designed by an architect called Kate Macintosh, who is one of the kind of great architects of this kind of post-war period of designing estates. It didn't even have a name. It was called something like 256 or 269 in Court Road. Yeah, and they heard about this. Somehow I can't even remember how we got in contact with them. Usually people get in contact with us, and they said they wanted to be part of Open Garden Estates this year. This was in 2016. And one of the things they decided to do, apart from having this kind of guided tour around the estate, is they were going to rechristen the estate as well. They were going to call it the Macintosh Court. Finally, it got a name after 50 years or something like that. So they named it after the architect, and they love the architect. They got on very well with her. So they came along. We publicised this very widely, and it really kind of caught a lot of people's attention. I think because the idea of demolishing a sheltered housing estate and evicting this community of elderly people, quite elderly people, really got people's backs up. It was, particularly crude of Lambeth. The other thing is, just before the event itself, Lambeth got cold feet, and they changed their mind about it as well. I was at a meeting when they kind of announced this, so we were also celebrating the survival of the estate. Shows what good policy can do. everyone came along to this. There was lots of journalists there, there were filmmakers, and this is Kate here, second from the right. And these are the kind of these activists, the residents who lived there, and yeah, it was a very beautiful moment. And they all sitting together celebrating the survival of the estate. They were saying, they said some very funny things about what they thought Lambeth could do to them because they were old and stupid, so we weren't at all old and stupid. And this group, a small group, there's probably about 50 people living there. They really got their act together. One of our members, he's got this thing about making these blue plugs, you know, which you usually have for famous people. Again, it's kind of like us imitating, trying to sort of say the value of a place is not only for the manor houses and stuff. These estates are very important. They're part of our community. They're very important parts of the fabric of London. So he makes these blue plugs. In this case, this is Macintosh Court, and as you can see, the residents really liked having that. There's a real desire for these things. So one of the things we're trying to do with working with these communities is to get into them, but also about revaluing these communities to kind of contest these enormously and very purposefully done negative stereotypes about these communities. Not just the communities, but not just that estate, but the people who live in them. One of the things we did, we created a sort of photo story, if you like. This is a fragment that I'm going to show you here, which proved very popular. We kind of thought, what was it about this? It kind of got people. What we did is we took photos of Central Hill Estate, showing just how beautiful it is, how green it is, how it isn't this sort of concrete nightmare that we're encouraged to believe, and how it's been described by Lambeth Council as a reason to demolish it. The first architects who were brought in to come up with these designs about why they should demolish it, the very first thing they did in their consultation, they took a photo of the estate at night, put it on their Twitter account, said, would you walk down this street at night? So straight away they're trying to demonise it as a place of crime and so on. So what we did is, we did a very simple thing, we took some beautiful photos, we captured them with the kind of negative tropes that people use, councillors, politicians, journalists, everyone, about these people, their communities and their estates. So, could you live on this estate? Trapped in a concrete jungle, isolated by poorly lit walkways, in homes with no individuality, caught in a poverty trap, with gangs of kids roaming the streets, a breeding ground for antisocial behaviour, a haven for crime and drug dealing, a sick estate that should be demolished. If you're aware of this, you're aware that these are tropes that you hear kids used all over and over again. It's a very simple thing, which I'm sure as artists you know. I used to be an art student in the 80s as well, and I loved kind of combining text with images. It's a very simple way of pointing out, without much argument, the absurdity and the prejudice, if you like, behind this kind of discourse of estate communities. The other thing is to get into these estates and talk to the people themselves. One of the things that Geraldine organised on West Kensington and Gibbs Green Estate, the one that we worked with in Hammersmith and Fulham, is the people who live on those estates know them better than you ever will. The best thing, you've got to get to them so they can talk to you about what they want, what they like about the estate, what they want repaired on it, what they want, how they think you could improve it. And one of the ways to do that is we organise walking tours, when groups of residents get together and they take us round the estate, but they also organise to go into individual residents' homes and they can take you in. We can actually see what the homes look like architecturally, but we can also get to talk to the people who live in them. And if they say, well, I've got a problem with condensation, I've got a problem with mould, this home is too big for me, my children have moved out, I'd like to move to a smaller one. Or alternatively, Christ, I've got no more room here, I need more rooms. So we get to talk to people about that. When we did a series of these walking tours, and one of the ways we mapped it out is here you've got an outline of the actual estate within the surrounding terrace streets. And what we did is sorry, this is a bit of a low-res slide, we put everything they said into a kind of map. It looks like a kind of futurist kind of collage or something. So everything they wrote about a particular area, we wrote into the area as well. So it's a way of kind of graphically mapping out opinions about the estate that came from the residents themselves. Then we've had a series of kind of exhibitions and consultations with residents. So we'll come up with the initial designs, and we'll put them in an exhibition. and then the residents can come and tell us about it. Now, in this estate, they had a community, what do we call it, community organiser, who was kind of mediating between us and the residents. And at these consultations, these are kind of the architectural boards or designs. But the residents themselves were presenting them, selected residents who volunteered, would present them to the other residents. So it's not us coming in and sort of saying, right, we're the architects, this is what you need to do. The residents themselves would kind of, we talk to them about it. They would actually talk to, because they know their people, they know their friends, they know their community. And these people here are sitting around, are presenting it to themselves. It's not you coming in from above and telling people what to do. It's giving people the role to actually talk to their people. Because of this was a wonderful event. This kind of room full of shouting people, about 60 to 80 people, talking about it. And as you can see, the designs that we're giving to them, they get covered. People scribble all over them. They put post-its over them with all these suggestions. We take them away. We look at it again. Then we come back to them again. This is kind of a process of kind of talking to these people. Similar here, this is from Central Hill, an exhibition. As you can see, we put up the kind of the alternatives, the design alternatives that we've got on these boards around the left. Then there was a big kind of meeting. We did a little presentation of what we're doing. Some of the leaders of the campaign went up and talked to the residents themselves. And of course, people came up and scribbled all over the boards as well. One of the best things anyone's ever written about our work was from one of the residents of this. And they said, this is the first time that architects have looked at the existing value in these estates. Usually architects are always looking about how we can demolish them and rebuild them. Same up on, this is Northwold Estate, the one up in Hackney. And on the Patmore Estate consultation, where again Geraldine's organised quite a few walking tours. This is actually from a very early consultation with us when we literally they were kind of getting introduced to us. They wondered who the hell we were. This is a wonderful photograph by a photographer who works with us. It captures what these meetings are like. It's kind of interesting as well. These people have been told their whole life that where they live is a slum. It's rubbish. It's run down. It's bad. And when you get a whole bunch of people coming in and designing these estates, suddenly they're like, maybe my place is interesting. It's what I kind of said before about these negative stereotypes become taken on, if you like, by the community. And when you come in and you say, you kind of start to sort of like point out the value in these buildings, how well they're designed, how big they are, how generously proportioned, but they just need a bit of maintenance, they just need a bit of looking after. People get very excited about that. Okay. How much time over there?
Track of time.
Okay.
Carry on.
Carry on. Okay, third part. I don't usually get to talk about this. I don't know how it's going to go. It's kind of fun to do it, I guess. And I thought this might be relevant to you as artists, and I don't want to preempt how you're thinking about this. But I guess ASH is, we're not a group. We're an organisation. We have kind of a core, but we work with a very wide range of people. And when we're working on a particular project, whether that's working with an estate community, or reading, or trying to read and pull apart a piece of legislation, or all the kind of other things we do. If we're putting on a protest, if we're writing a document, if we're holding a meeting, we work with different groups of people who come in because they like what ASH is doing. And really, there's a lot of architects who work with us, mostly young architects, mostly architects who have recently graduated and are not happy about what they're doing in these big architectural companies, what they're being asked to do, because most of them are working with companies who are doing the demolitions of these estates, and they're not happy with the way they're treated, their work conditions and stuff. They'll come and work with us, but we've got a lot of other people who work with us, among which there are a lot of artists, filmmakers, artists, writers, etc. So even though we're called Architects of Social Housing, at least half the people we work with are definitely not architects at all. Or they're just simply housing campaigners. There's a very wide range of people. So a lot of the time people come up to us and say, look, I'm not an architect, but I'd really like to work with you. What can I do? And we're like, well, what can you do? You come in and decide what you can do. We really are just a way of organising people, saying, look, we've got a project going on here, you might be interested in working with that. Here we are. This is not ASH. This is a bunch of people that used to hang around with, called Class War. They're an old sort of 70s group of punks. Most of them are pensioners now, but they really know how to do protests. They've got a terrible reputation amongst a lot of people. They're all anarchists and they don't believe in anything, except defending the states. They really believe, they're very much about working class culture, and they're very, very good at identifying the class aspect of the state demolition, or lots of other policies, but for us it is. But it is a kind of an attack on working class culture. Well, it's kind of what it's kind of about, yeah. I'm showing this because this happened. Yeah, can you show okay? This happened. You can't hear the sound, probably just as well. Yeah, show okay. This was before Ash was formed. I was on this march. They've been standing in front of poor doors, which are segregated entrances for affordable housing components of a very luxury development in one commercial street in Yorkgate. They've been holding a vigil there. I think they used to go down every Thursday night, I think, for something like 22 months straight, and pointing out, that this was social segregation being built into our architecture and therefore built into our city. And one day they found out that another new development on the other side, right by the mayor's office, City Hall, there's another new development. They had rich gardens, so there were gardens which were available access to people who were not in the affordable housing. So they were kind of proposing this, and they went on a march. It was a rotten night, it was pouring with rain. They got out their beautiful banners and they all marched down this road. And they brought a huge amount of traffic to a standstill. And it was raining and they had their flares up, and as you can see, it was great fun. Then we got onto Tower Bridge and they basically just stood there. And the coppers were saying, you have to move, and we were like, just not listening to them. And when we got to the new development, there was a huge amount of security outside, got ready for a big fight. And they were right at this point disappointed to realise there was probably about 15 of us there. And a lot of us were kind of walking on sticks and stuff. And what it taught me, because I filmed this is my film. There's been a lot of people since who wanted, like BBC wanted to put this on their shows and stuff like that. When I put this on YouTube, I think within about a week or something, it got 100,000 views. And the response to it was hilarious. It was amazing. And what it taught me was, when you're doing protests, when you're trying to draw attention to an issue, you're not doing it for the people on the street, because there's very few people there. You're doing it for how you share it in the media, because the media's got far bigger access. It's a form of theatre, in a way. So you should always think about how you're going to record it, how you're going to represent it, how you can share it and disseminate it. And if you do it right, you reach far, far larger groups of people than you'll ever get at the actual event itself. Okay? There were about 15 people running this event, doing actually making it happen, but it reached literally 100,000 people, probably a lot more than that. I've been on demonstrations and protests where we've had thousands and thousands of people. The next day, there is nothing in the press about it. So it's not about numbers on the street. You've got to think about who your audience is, I think. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, just stop that. So the first time that Ash did organise a protest was at the AJ 120. The AJ is the Architects Journal. It's the premier architects journal. Everyone reads it in the UK, and they were having an award ceremony. All these people do nowadays have awards, and they were holding it at the Tower of London, and they very unwisely decided to have this giant gazebo in the moat. And we thought, that's a good place to make a big fuss. If they're going to be so ostentatious about having this big gazebo in the Tower of London, we thought, oh, this is a good idea. Now, some people from some squatters from the Fight for the Aylesbury campaign, the Aylesbury estate, a few months before, they crashed a architectural practice during a meeting. The architectural practices who were responsible for designing the redevelopment of the Aylesbury estate following its demolition. And I thought this was a really good idea. So we basically nixed their idea about targeting architects and their role in the whole process of estate demolition. So making them realise that they are not kind of impartial, but they are actually not fundamental, but they're crucial to how you go from an estate community existing to it being evicted, socially expensive in the area, and the buildings being demolished and redeveloped. So we went after this award, and the trouble is, there's obviously going to be a whole line of security at the top of the Tower of London. So we thought, how can we go in? And funny enough, Jodie came up with the idea. She said, why did, because we had all these ideas, we thought, we'll get a gas balloon and put it up and send stuff across. We had to get to these people because they were so far away. Jodie came up with the idea, why don't we make paper airplanes? So we all sat around in the kind of the pre-organisation of this, squatting his, what was it we were doing? I think we were squatting the Loughborough stairs, something like that. This whole room full of hundreds and hundreds of sheets of paper. All these squatters kind of folding up these paper airplanes.
No, we folded them.
We've folded a lot, and luckily we did, because their folds were rubbish. We decided very much to again. Anyway, we all turned up, a bunch of us. There was all the security there, and down the moat there's all these people in their kind of penguin suits and all the women in these kind of dresses. And I remember distinctly when I sort of said, right, this protest is open. And I threw this paper airplane, sailing all the way across the moat, right down, and I'm not lying, there was a guy standing there with the drinks thing, one of the servers, they landed right in his drink. And suddenly everyone kind of looked up, and suddenly there was this kind of bombardment. And it all came down, these architects are looking out wondering what on earth they're doing, what is going on. What we did is we wrote on one side this kind of joke, it's my joke anyway, why do architects wear black? Because they always do wear black, as I'm sure you know. And we said the answer is because they're the funeral directors of the working class. They really didn't like this. But the guy who runs the AJ, the editor, sub-editor, he picked it up, photographed it, and put it on Twitter. And he came up to speak to me afterwards and said, what's this about? And I told him what it was about. And the next week, the AJ, which as I said is the biggest circulation, published something like 7 pages on our protest. And it included this manifesto, which I'd written out, Fight for Elbright's manifesto. At this point, we didn't identify that Ash had any involvement in this, because Geraldine was on.
There's some number from the affiliated group Architects Social Housing.
That's absolutely right, okay. Yeah, it was very much done through the Fight for the Elbright, because we were a bit worried about how this would impact on us, as a kind of an architectural group. That kind of went out the window later. But we wrote a series of points, what we demand, what we're criticising, what we're actually condemning. So we're protesting, we're accusing, we demand, we call for. And this really struck them. They said, we've sort of seen this before. And they published our kind of manifestos of in this. And I think that's another very important point. You know, how many times have you stood on a demo and people are saying variations on what do we want, blah, 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 that kind of answer thing. There's ways to get across real detailed information. And if you've got that detailed information as well, which shows that you're aware of what's going on, like one of the things we did, we talked about the codes of conduct for architects and things like that, and we thought they were breaking it by demolishing these estates and evicting these communities. It makes people sit up and go, actually, these are serious people. They're not just like protesters sort of saying, no, no, no. They're actually demanding something. They're making calls for something. Shortly after this, we kind of got the bit between our teeth here, and we thought, this is kind of interesting. Yeah, let's go after the architectural profession. And we did another protest. This is the Sterling Prize protest. The Sterling Prize is the biggest prize in the architectural calendar. It happens every October. They really make a song and dance about it. It's held at the Royal Institute of British Architects. It's very prestigious and it has a huge amount of press around it. Not only in the architectural world, but there's going to be BBCs there and so on and so forth. So what we're doing is we're pimping off their publicity, if you like. We're using it. We don't have to generate it ourselves. We just kind of crash it in the party. And we did a similar thing. That year, the Sterling Prize had nominated as the best building in British architecture for that year, Neo Bankside, which I don't know if you know these. These are down by Tate Modern. Yeah, they are bloody appalling. And we went into all the detail of the tiny proportion of affordable housing, the fact that affordable housing was being built off-site, so there was absolutely no affordable housing in the actual buildings, the price of these buildings, all the dirty deals that were done between the development consortium, blah, 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 blah. There's lots of detail there, which I won't go into here. And we announced this on the Ash page, which was kind of getting quite popular by that stage. And it really got taken up by the architectural press. I think pretty much every magazine covered it. And people got very excited about this, the architects in particular. But suddenly they went from being these boring old professionals to people who were kind of on the front line of this big issue about the housing crisis. And even though they were being criticised, a lot of the periodicals took this up and said things like, you know, for the first time in the history of architecture, the people deciding the future of architecture in Britain would not be inside the Royal Institute of British Architects, but would be the protesters outside. It's kind of interesting the way they first responded to us. They quite liked Ash at this point. I thought we kind of made them a little bit more interesting. When we held the protest, to which 50 people came maybe, again, not a huge number, but enough to make a... And of course, everyone who was going into the prize, all dressed up in their finery, they all had to go through the gauntlet of these very angry protesters, which kind of changed their evening a little bit. The other thing we did is we had a petition to the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, accusing them of breaking the ARB Code of Conduct for Architects because of what they were doing, and a rush of other things, but also saying, you need to change this code. So we're actually making demands of them which show that we understood, what their purpose was. We're saying, if you're the RIBA, you're meant to be overseeing the behaviour, the principles, and the values of architecture, you're breaking them, so we demand some change. About a month or a few weeks before the protest, we were actually invited into the RIBA to speak to their head honchos. It was a very interesting meeting. We thought we were going to come in and be kind of confronted by these very sharp media people who kind of run rings around us. It was actually completely the other way around. They kind of sat there terrified while we told them off. We issued this petition. The other thing we did is we instigated our own prize, which is an alternative to the Sterling Prize. You've heard of the Carbuncle Cup, have you heard of the Carbuncle Award? It's that Prince Charles one, isn't it, or something like that, for the worst building. Well, we invented our own one. It's called the O.J. Simpson Prize, and it's awarded for getting away with murder. And this, of course, is the Neo-Bankside. We kind of take this orange juice card, we make it look like it. We've had this for a couple of years now, I think, haven't we? And we stood outside and we awarded it to the architects of Sterling Rogers. Funny enough, when we went back the following year to the next prize, they actually heard about our O.J. Simpson Prize as well. They knew all about it. We hope it's going to keep on. In this first year, again, this is Oliver Wainwright, who's the architectural critic for The Guardian. He was turning up and he was allowed inside because he's covering it for The Guardian. And he picked up one of our planes, because we were using planes again until the police said don't, because we were going to arrest him for assault. But he unfolded the plane, and underneath, the architect who designed Neo-Bankside, he once said, architecture is always political. So we thought, great, we'll use your words back against you. And on the back of the demands and the protests, we had this term, we had this thing you can see holding there, architecture is political. And brilliantly, credit to him, when he was being interviewed by this BBC journalist about the candidates for the prize, and he mentioned Neo-Bankside, Oliver kind of unwrapped it and said, architecture is always political. It was only a few seconds, but we managed to get with the BBC, and our protest kind of got to a lot of people because of that. Shortly after, this is in January 2016, the Housing and Planning Bill was going through. This is going to have, has had and is having, and will continue to have a huge impact. I won't go through the kind of the things it does, but it's an attack. It's a real assault on council and social housing. It has many obscenities in it, which I won't go into here. And we started reading this bill. We actually convened a kind of a group to get together to help us read through it, because we're not lawyers and reading through these. If you've ever read through a government bill, it's very, very difficult to understand. So we got together and we read through it, and we started writing about this. And somehow we kind of found ourselves kind of organising this protest. It was the very, very first one, which we had held outside Parliament. And again, as you can see, it had an enormous amount of coverage from the press and so on. We were actually, so I remember I was so exhausted by organising this protest that when I got there, I didn't speak of it. And we didn't have any kind of signs or anything like that. So this is actually a doctored photo that didn't say ash on it. But we thought, when we were talking about it afterwards, we'd put stick ash in, just to remind people that we were the people who actually organised this. Trouble is, I put this in because very shortly after this, the housing, the opposition to the housing bill got reappropriated by the Labour Party. So you had lots of groups like Kill the Housing Bill. This is actually my poster, not theirs. And you actually had, on these marches, there was a series of marches and protests and so on. You had the councillors, the council leaders, including Liv Pepper, I saw the other day, who were actually demolishing these homes, being on the march itself. And that's the trouble with this stuff. As soon as it becomes kind of, it gets reappropriated very quickly. So we actually had people getting up on mics who were responsible for the estate demolition, implementing the estate demolition programme, talking against it, and then blaming it all on the government. In fact, they themselves are absolutely implicit in it. We had someone from Southwark what's his name? One of the housing councillors there. What's his name? Richard something or other. He was actually getting up at the protest within sight of the Haygate. 1,200 council homes demolished, maybe 82 homes for social rent you're going to get back. And you had the guy who was partly responsible for that getting up at the housing bill protest and saying vote Labour. One of the things we also did shortly afterwards, this is in February, we live in Lambeth, and of course Charlie Chaplin is from Lambeth. Part of the elephant redevelopment. One of the things they've done, you can see in the right-hand side there. This is a still from their promotional film, so you can't really see it very well here. But they've appropriated Chaplin. Because Chaplin is from the area, and it's part of their kind of way that they're selling this place. So get a nice little bit of old Charlie Chaplin, you know, kind of good old Lambeth Walk, kind of London, while at the same time they're actually demolishing that kind of London that we stood for. And I thought Chaplin is he's a figure that I love very much, and he's a real figure of rebellion. If you've seen his films, I don't know, no matter how big the guy is that he's facing or how many times he gets kicked, he always gets up and fights back. And I kind of thought, what would Chaplin do if he was living here? Because places like the underpass at the Elephant Castle, the roundabout, used to have lots of murals of Chaplin in it. The Charlie Chaplin pub, which was named after him, I think in the 70s, is being demolished. It's been boarded up now. The homes that he lived in were all getting demolished. So what we did is we organised a walk, which started with, that's on the walk here. It was of all the places associated with Chaplin where he lived, and also what we did is we went. One of the things we did is we went round to where the places we lived, and we talked about how much the houses are worth now, and people were very, very surprised walking around this, you know, kind of traditional working class part of London and finding out the houses they were looking at were worth, you know, £3-5 million or something. We also went into the estates. I can't remember what it's called now, but one of the estates around here, and talked to people about the Housing and Planning Act, or Bill at the time, and how it would affect them. And we just basically got to talk to people. It's a way of kind of, you know, getting people to come on the walk and tell them about what's going on in the area, but also get locals as well. And about this time, I think a lot of the housing movement is very, it's mostly, it's a lot of people who are Labour supporters. And it creates a real kind of contradiction in this, because a lot of people in the housing movement want to see Jeremy Corbyn brought in and blah, blah, blah. And there's a real problem with that, because most of the councils in London, there's 20 Labour councils versus 10 Tory, and most of the estates are in Labour councils. And one of the things we've increasingly done against enormous opposition is to identify the role of the Labour Party in this estate, in implementing this estate demolition programme. I was just saying there's 230 estates, 195 are in Labour councils, or in Labour boroughs. Unfortunately, I can't show you, but this is one day we found out that this was in the weeks before the Labour, the London mayoral elections, and we found out that Jeremy Corbyn and Sadiq Khan were meeting up in Islington to go door knocking together. It just been revealed in the press that Khan was on Corbyn's list of hostile MPs, and this was kind of a show of unity between them. So we thought we'd turn up and confront them with Labour's kind of role. But we went down there and we kind of basically chased them down the street, kind of saying, what is your role in, you know, why is Labour so complicit in this estate demolition programme? We'd found out just before that, as part of the mayoral election, all the candidates, the Lib Dem, the Tory and the Labour, had met with the London Housing Commission, who were producing a report produced by the Institute of Public Policy Research, which recommended demolishing the council homes of 400,000 Londoners. And all three mayoral candidates, the three big ones, had signed up to this. And we were saying, why is London housing policy being written by an estate agent, by Savills estate agents? So, so we kind of went and it was a very last minute thing, because we only found out about it the day before. We went down there, a filmmaker who works with us, Nikita Wolf, who has her own production company. She gave me a big mic and kind of of basically put a camera over my shoulder and over her shoulder. And surprising, really surprising to me, when I kind of went up and said, "Sonny, can I ask you something about your estate demolition, your support for this proposal to demolish all these estates?" Instead of turning around and putting me in my place, he started running off down the street. So I kind of walked after him. And it kind of turned into an incredible farce. It was a real kind of a publicity disaster for them. And I walked all the way down the street with all these people trying to elbow me out of the way. And you could hear his PR woman saying, "Just keep walking and smiling." And all this is on camera. So I chased him down, walked down the street after him saying, "Can you explain?" He gave me, everyone else was silent, he gave me time to basically confront him with all these facts about Labour's complicity in this estate demolition programme. Eventually he got in the car and drove away. So I then turned around and went after Jeremy Corbyn. And he did exactly the same bloody thing. And it was kind of extraordinary, for it created this amazing sort of ridiculous sort of bit of, I was really surprised. I thought they would just turn around and kind of handle it. And we put this up again on social media and YouTube and everything, and it's become, unfortunately for me, quite famous. But it certainly drew a lot of people's attention to it. This is a protest that we did, which I identified this role of this estate agent, which I mentioned, called Savills. They're not really estate agents, they're a property firm. They are enormously powerful. They are advising every council in London on its estate regeneration programme. They produce reports which identify which estates should be demolished. They are writing housing policy for the city, basically. That's as good as that. So we went to their headquarters, which is in Margaret Street, sort of, off Oxford Street. And we did this. We thought we want to go down there and kind of do a little kind of event, kind of a protest. And we thought, how are we going to do it? Now there was a great big march on that day. I think it was called March for Homes or something like that, which was one of these A to B marches where people kind of all end up in Trafalgar Square and they're kind of just talking to each other. We thought that's a really good idea because all the police will be down there. So we went to this place and we had and we managed to get inside and we made a film of this. I'm not going to try and do these films. It's just two. It doesn't matter. Don't matter. You can see all these on our website if you want to have a look at that. And this really was kind of a watershed in drawing people's attention. If I write a text like the one I showed you there, and I put it up on the Ash blog, a few hundred people who can read it. There's something about the drama of the housing crisis which responds very well, I think, to film. There's something about it. I'm not quite sure what it is. It's very dramatic. You just really have to put a camera at what's going on. And you see this confrontation between enormously powerful corporate bodies like this, or governments, or councils, and their kind of complete accountability, and kind of little people like us, kind of confronting them with the truth. People don't read text unless you give them something like, "Oh, what's this about? What is this protest about? What's going on?" And then they will read your text. So I think that's a very useful thing to know. You need the drama, you need the arts, you need the theatre to get people then interested in the real nitty-gritty stuff which you can read about. Sure, I can't show you to these, but they're good fun. This is the second Sterling. Doesn't matter. This is the second Sterling Prize protest, which we did the second year. This is when the first redevelopment site on the Highgate estate, so at the Elephant and Castle, 1,200 council homes were demolished. They're only promising to build 82. The first redevelopment site will be completed, and it's called Trafalgar Square. Place. Sorry, not Square, Place. And in its wisdom, the RIBA decided to nominate it for the Sterling Prize. We thought, bloody hell, they didn't listen to us last year, did they? It was quite extraordinary. We were like, wow, they really don't know what's going on in the world. Interestingly, at the same time, the Aylesbury estate, exactly the same time, a report had been produced by the government inspector saying that Southwark Council's decision to compulsory purchase leaseholders' homes was in violation of their human rights. So at the same time, we had, on the one hand, violation of human rights on an estate demolition which is in the future, hopefully not, but it certainly looks like it's going ahead. And then you've got the RIBA, which is meant to be the overseer of the kind of duties of an architect, nominating what had been developed on another estate. So we thought, right, we're really going to make a big fuss about this. Strangely enough, compared to the first year, can't see this again.
Try and see the two little things on that.
Try it again. This year, the previous year we had, it's not working. The previous year, as I said, the architectural profession, the press, loved us. They covered us everywhere. This time, we didn't get a single mention. Every single periodical completely blanked what we were doing. We've still got lots of coverage from kind of housing and activist organisations. The architectural press, they suddenly realised we were not kidding, and we were damaging their profit margins. So almost every one of these big architectural practices are working in state demolition redevelopment. So we got completely blanked out about it. Interestingly though, sorry, I'll go back to this, the Haygate is being redeveloped by a property developer called Lend-Lease, which is originally an Australian company, it's now an international property developer. And the ABC News, which is an Australian broadcasting network, news network, came over here, they kind of contacted us and said, what's all this, we want to make a film about Lend-Lease, about this Australian company. So not only did they interview with us, and talked to us, got a lot of information out of us, but they came down to the prize itself, and they made an entire news programme about Lend-Lease. We concluded our protest on it, which I can't show you, but you can see online. It's very strange that in London, if you want to know what's going on in London, you have to look at Al Jazeera, or you have to look at RT News, or you have to look at an Australian broadcasting thing. The media in this country is so against repressing this, as I said before, you've got marches of thousands and thousands of people, it's completely repressed. So you've got to find a way to get around that. You can do it by working with these outside organisations. Another thing we did was we identified some of the key people responsible for the Haygate, the demolition of the Haygate, and that includes Ben Darkshire, who's the president of the IRBA, DRM Architects, who designed the new development of Trafalgar Place, where houses of two-bedroom homes are selling for something like £640,000. The people on the people primarily responsible on the council, etc., etc., etc. And what we did is, and this is a displacement map of where the leaseholders on the Haygate estate, where they ended up after the demolition of the estate. As you can see, it's to the outer reaches or all across South East England. Some people end up, Wales, Newcastle, whatever. So what we did is we identified where these places were, and we sent them these photos, which I think we just got off of Google Street View or something like that. We made it look like postcards saying, wish you were here. And we were what we did is we turned up with kind of hundreds of these, handed them out to people and said, could you please go and send these, put these in the post and send them to the people. So it's just a way of it's kind of a bit of a gimmick, but it's kind of a way of, maybe these people, I'm sure it didn't have any effect on the people who were doing this, but it's kind of a way of bringing home practically what it means to be moved out of your community. This community goes shattered, and all the people to actually identify names of the people who are responsible for this. This is another campaign we did. This is an individual campaign. We call it Campaign for Betty. Betty O'Mahari was a resident of the Loughborough Park estate down in Brixton. She'd been living there 10 years with her two kids. She's a single mother. Even though she was there for 10 years, they never gave her a secure tenancy. They kept her on an assured short-haul tenancy. The reasons that councils do this, so in this case it was a housing association. This is the Guinness Partnership again, people who were trying to demolish the North Wall, is when they demolish the estate and they redevelop it, they're already under an obligation to have fewer tenancies. So leading up to the demolition, over many years, they try to get as many people out of the estate as possible, particularly people with secure tenancies. They either rehouse them, and they never, when those homes are empty, they never replace them with someone on a secure tenancy. So in this case, you might have an estate of 150 homes, but by the time it's actually demolished, you might have maybe only half of them occupied by people on secure tenancies. So then when they rebuild the estate, they've only got the obligation to house those people. Betty, who lived there for 10 years, had no right to come back, but she was one of the real noisy people on the campaign to kind of resist it. And she fought for a home. Because of that, Guinness Partnership, which is a housing association, they put her on a new housing association, a new estate, which is part of their stock, in Lambeth, Elephant Castle area. However, her rent went from being £109 a week to £265 a week. Now, the reason they can do that is because housing associations are swapping social rent for affordable rent. Affordable rent means up to 80% of market rate. This is not only exactly 80% of market rate, It's the maximum that a single mother with 2 children can claim on housing benefit. Through this entire process, Betty not only lost her job, she ran a kind of a cafe in Brixton, which was very successful. She was really part of that community. She got pushed out of the community. Her kids had to move schools. She went through an enormous amount of stress. At the end of it, she ended up with a rent which she could only pay if she was on benefits. This is a way that state demolition also works to take huge amounts of money, 21 billion quid a year going on housing benefit. It's an enormous transfer of public money into private hands. So they're taking someone off of a social rent, putting her into a rent, and she can only earn that if she's on housing benefit. She can only pay it on housing benefit. So it took her from someone who was completely independent of the state, who was living in a home that was her own, even though she didn't have a secure tenancy, and made her completely dependent on it. To add insult to injury, they then took her to court for not paying sufficient of the funds because she couldn't keep up with the payments. So we thought this is enough. This is bloody enough. So we got behind it. We don't usually do individual campaigns like this, but we thought this highlighted so many things about the complicity of housing associations, and above all about this transfer from social rent to affordable rent. All the debates at the moment around developments is like, oh, how much affordable housing has it got on it? Affordable housing is not affordable to people who live on council estates. It's much higher increase. This is very typical of an increase when you get moved out of a council home from £109 a week to £265. That's over £1,000, well over £1,000 a month, just on rent for a single mother bringing up 2 kids. So we did a lot about this. We kind of got behind it, and again, it really got people's outrage, I think, and a lot of. We managed to get her on London Live. We got her, and we all turned up. Again, I've got footage here which you can't show. We turned up at the court hearing when Guinness was trying to evict her, and I think partly because of the publicity around this, a lawyer came in, a housing lawyer, a specialist housing lawyer came in, and they represented her in court. And funny thing is, we got thrown out of the technicality because Guinness didn't have their paperwork in order. Always goes to show, I think, don't think because they're bigger than you, more powerful and richer, they have a clue what they're doing. They're idiots and all sorts of things. And they actually got them in a technicality. When they originally evicted her, she wasn't in debt at all. They actually owed her. She'd actually paid more than her debt as well. They were just bullying her, really. And she thinks it's because of her role in resisting the Loughborough Park estate. They're basically trying to persecute her. I'm just almost finishing now. I've probably got a bit too long, sorry. At the general election last year, we encouraged people to go to hustings, and if you've been to a hustings, you've got the candidates for the MP, and people put in questions beforehand. And we were noticing at these hustings, people weren't talking about what we thought was the biggest issue in London, which a lot of the mayors had said, which is the housing issue and the housing crisis. People were talking about Brexit, they were talking about fox hunting, they were talking about cycling paths, talking about school education, but not this big issue of housing. And we went to one of these hustings and we tried to put this question on the floor and they wouldn't take it. One of the reasons it wasn't taken is the chair of the floor was the head of the Institute of Public Policy Research, who was writing this policy recommending the demolition of homes and the recategorisation of council estates as brownfield land. It's kind of disused land. So we complained about this and people said, well, why don't you hold your own hustings? We thought, well, we would. So we held a hustings on Cotton Gardens Estate, which is the estate we live on, which was specifically devoted to the question of estate, estate demolition, state generation and housing policy. And we invited the candidates in to kind of talk about it. And again, we made a film of this, which I'm not going to show you here. I'll pass on from this. This was I'll pass on from that. You mentioned John. You mentioned this social housing kind of thing. One of the there was a publication by a group called an architectural practice called Karakusevich Carson, who are very, very involved in the estate demolition and redevelopment program. And recently they held an exhibition at the RIBA, and they produced a book which was called Social Housing. This is the cover, although we've changed it. It's a yellow cover, and it didn't say demolitions and privatisations. It said sort of design principles and things like that. We noticed that going through these booklets, which are produced by architectural companies, by think tanks, by state agents, and so on and so forth, they're kind of models of what a state regeneration would be. So they're kind of exemplary. They kind of examples of what an estate regeneration should be. And it's always about the design component of it. How much they look, how better they look, how much of an increased housing capacity it is. What they don't mention is the cost of the new homes, how many of the original community came back who could afford to, how many of them were evicted, all the things which actually allow the reader to decide, is an estate regeneration a success, or is it a form of social cleansing? So what we did is we produced a kind of an e-book, which brought together about 13 case studies in estate regeneration that we produced. So we've gone to look at individual estate regenerations, including places like the Aylesbury, or also the Haygate, sort of a dozen others across London, and also outside of London as well. We did one on Park Hill Estate up in Sheffield. And we talked about all the things that don't get talked about what happened to the community, about the price of the new homes, about who paid the funding for it, about whether it's been privatised, all the things that are being repressed, literally not spoken about in all these manuals, these booklets being produced promoting the estate regeneration programme. And again, this is an e-book that you can look at on our website. Then, of course, right in the middle of all this, the Grenfell Tower fire happened. And we called a meeting about a week after the fire, because we noticed that straight away what the fire, this terrible loss of life, was being used by journalists and politicians, including the mayor, and people like David Lammy, and a lot of idiots who've never even been onto the stage, to say estates are fundamentally unsafe. Tower blocks are structurally unsound, dangerous to people living in them, we should knock them all down. Which is kind of language which was used and is still being used. And saying Grenfell Tower was structurally, it's designed as a 1970s tower block, it's unsafe, we should knock these things down. Sadiq Khan said about it, he said, one of the legacies of this terrible fire is that we knocked down London, not just London, but for Sadiq Khan, it's London, tower blocks across London. Now, we know damn well that the fire was not started because of anything wrong with the block. It became the conflagration it was because the Grenfell Tower had been subjected to an estate regeneration programme. In this case, not demolition of it, but the cladding of it. The reason it was clad, we've got this, we've seen all the planning documents, is to improve its appearance for the people in the surrounding area. Not the people inside, the people in the surrounding area. And the reason it was done is because council blocks, with all the negative kind of imagery around it, they suppress values, land values in the area. They were initially, the original regeneration program for this was to demolish it and build a new luxury housing in its place. But they changed their mind about that because when the local council, because I think when they were doing it, it was just after the financial crash, the market in luxury housing had kind of fallen. So they decided, right, we're not going to demolish it, we're going to clad it. And as we know, there's another 300 estates or tower blocks around in the UK which have got very similar cladding to this. And it's absolutely a fire trap. So the first thing we wanted to say to people was we wanted to assure people in our own tower blocks, we live in tower blocks, we had lots of people coming up and saying, Christ, it's our place, there's so much fear-mongering going on. If you live in a tower block, you're living in a fire trap. And we were like, not only is this incorrect, but it's being used for a very nasty political end and financial end, which is the demolition of our council estates. So we held a meeting very shortly after this, and this turned into a kind of a huge report, which we kind of produced in about a month, and which you're welcome to read on our website, which talks about the truth about Grenfell Tower. That is not only about the fire and the causes of it, the technical causes, but also the bureaucratic structures which allowed those causes to be put in place. But also about how it was being used to promote the state demolition programme. Then last year we got invited to the Institute of Contemporary Art, the ICA, to put on an exhibition, which I think Joel, you've seen. Did you go there? Yeah. And what we did is, as you can see in the right-hand room, we put up basically what I'm showing you today, kind of what I showed you earlier on, the kind of the design alternatives to demolition. But in the other room, we wanted to sort of put up images of campaigns as well. The architectural stuff is very much about the building. We wanted to talk about the actual campaigns and how they're fighting against this. And one of the things we did is, you can see up there, at the top there in the left room, we did this huge map, which which I've mentioned before, in which we mapped out London's estate regeneration programmes. These are estate regenerations either through demolition, privatisation, or partial demolition, or simply through gutting the place and kind of kicking all the run out and then redoing it up as they're doing it in Balfron Tower, which is going to lose to a massive loss of social housing. And these are the 237. And as you can see, the reds in Labour councils, blues are in Tory, and the Lib Dems are down here. This is an enormous map. It's like 4.5 metres high. It's not as big as this sort of thing. And it had a really huge effect on people when they came to the exhibition and saw it. And the thing it did most of people, the thing that most people kind of commented on, was they didn't realise how many were being done by Labour councillors. So it was a political map as well as a kind of geographical one. Then last December, which I'm shamelessly promoting here, someone made a film called Concrete Soldiers, Nikita Wolf. She's the filmmaker who's been following us around for a couple of years. And this is a film kind of made up. It's a bit about the campaigns that we've been working with. It's also a lot about the work of Ash itself and what we're doing, which has been very useful for us. And then finally, I'm sorry I've gone on way too long actually, but still, finally, all the propaganda stuff, all the protests, the kind of the events, the kind of the things that you're going to do, for us it's ultimately about getting people to this. This is our blog on our website. It's about getting people to read the information. You know, I said before about you need the theatre. Protest is not an end in itself. And I think over the last few years, because in 1915 there was an enormous amount of protest when we first, 2015, there's a huge amount of protest going on. There's barely a week went by, there wasn't some bloody big march going on. And I think people have begun to think that that's an end in itself. Protest is what we're trying to achieve. And often it's about because groups feel they don't have some sort of agency outside of that. The protest is about getting people to listen to you, then you've got to have something to say. The argument that somehow we are the many, we are the 99% and the 1%, we've got kind of democratic mass on our side is not true. The people protesting are a fraction of a percentage of the population. We don't have a democrat. Just because you get a few thousand people together saying, no, 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 the council goes, well, we've got many more thousands of people, they just voted us in. So protest and mass is not itself that gives you democratic weight. It doesn't say, well, we've got more people on our side. There's a way to establish who's got who on whose side, who has a mandate. We've just had it. We've had the local elections. And Labour councils, all of them got returned in. They actually made gains. In places like Lewisham, they've got the entire council backed up. I've seen no opposition at all. So protest is not an end in itself. It's only a direction to what you're actually trying to say, the think proposals you're making. And for us, all our work, pretty much, is on this website, which we've broken down into these different categories, which you're welcome to go and have a look at. And it's not just boasting, although we're kind of happy with it. I don't know if this is even good, but since we launched it, we've got about 150 articles on there, which has been visited 167 times. Amazingly, in 177 countries, which is crazy. We kind of got it on our website. We've been kind of read all over the place. So if you do the kind of publicity work, you can get large amounts of people kind of reading this. Okay, I think that's enough. Thank you for listening for so long.